The moment that elderly woman stopped her cleaning cart beside my desk and openly sniffed the air around me, I knew my carefully hidden life was about to unravel. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. She leaned in deliberately, her eyes studying me with an intensity that made every instinct scream danger. And then she smiled like she'd just discovered buried treasure. My heart stopped cold. Because if a random stranger could detect my omega scent through the industrial strength suppressants I took religiously every morning, then something was seriously wrong. And if my boss found out what I really was in this alpha-dominated corporate world, I'd be fired before lunch. Game over. Career destroyed. I closed my laptop quickly, trying to appear casual despite the panic flooding my system. "Thank you, ma'am," I managed, forcing a polite smile and hoping she'd just move along to the next cubicle. But she didn't. Instead, she moved closer, resting one weathered hand on the edge of my desk, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Do you have someone special?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. I froze completely. What kind of question was that? Why would the cleaning staff be asking about my relationship status? This wasn't normal workplace small talk. "No," I whispered, suddenly very aware of how vulnerable I felt. "I'm single." Something flickered in her eyes. Something calculating and shrewd that didn't match her humble uniform at all. "How old are you, dear?" 24, I answered automatically, discomfort crawling up my spine like cold fingers. She smiled then, but it wasn't a grandmotherly smile. It was knowing, satisfied, almost victorious. "Perfect," she murmured, more to herself than to me. Then, without another word, she simply wheeled her cart away, disappearing into the maze of cubicles as if the entire strange encounter had never happened. The rest of my workday passed in a fog. I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets or emails. My mind kept circling back to that woman, her confidence, her unusual behavior, the way she'd looked at me like she was appraising valuable merchandise. Real cleaning staff didn't act like that. They didn't ask personal questions or evaluate employees with such laser focus. By the time I left the office that evening, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress could do that to a person, right? Make them paranoid? I was fumbling with my apartment keys when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Are you free tomorrow evening?" It was her. That same woman. My pulse skyrocketed. "How did you get this number?" My voice came out higher than intended. Borderline panicked. "Can you meet at Rosewood Cafe tomorrow at 6? She continued as if I hadn't spoken, completely ignoring my question with practiced ease. "Why? Who are you really?" "Someone wants to meet you," she said simply, cryptically. "Who?" I demanded, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "My son." Click. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone screen like it might explode. What had just happened? A stranger had sniffed me at work, interrogated me about my personal life, somehow obtained my private phone number, and now wanted to introduce me to her son. This felt like the setup to either a fairy tale or a nightmare, and I honestly couldn't tell which. I spent the entire night lying awake, staring at my ceiling, replaying those two simple words, "my son." They shouldn't have carried so much weight, but they did. They implied intention, planning, purpose. This wasn't random. This woman had specifically targeted me, and now she wanted something. The possibilities spiraled through my exhausted mind. If she came from one of those powerful alpha families who actively hunted for suitable omegas to expand their bloodlines, I might already be caught in their web. And if they decided to force the issue, what could I do? I'd have to hide my suppressants better, guard my identity more carefully, and above all keep my emotions locked down tight. Because the moment I let someone in, the moment I allowed myself to feel something real, I'd be completely defenseless. When morning came, I went through my work routine like a zombie. I searched every floor of the office building during my breaks, looking for that mysterious cleaning woman, but she'd vanished. No trace, no sign she'd ever existed. It was like she'd been a ghost, there one moment and gone the next. As the day dragged toward evening, my anxiety intensified. Should I actually go to that cafe? Was I brave enough or foolish enough to walk into what might be an elaborate trap? But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity. Hope. What if this was my chance to experience something different? What if, for the first time in my carefully hidden life, someone might accept me exactly as I was? Or maybe I was being an idiot, and this was just a cruel scheme that would end with me hurt or worse. There was only one way to find out the truth. I would go to Rosewood Cafe. I would face whatever waited for me there, because living in constant fear and hiding was its own kind of prison. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to take a risk. I changed clothes 3 times before settling on something presentable but not too formal. Dark jeans and a button-down shirt that had seen better days. My hands shook as I combed my hair. My reflection in the mirror showed someone young, uncertain, and completely out of his depth. But I'd made my decision. The address led me to an upscale part of town I rarely visited, where the buildings were taller and cleaner, where people walked with the kind of confidence that came from never worrying about rent or groceries. I stood outside Rosewood Cafe for a full minute, watching well-dressed patrons through the windows, trying to gather courage. This was it. The moment everything would either change for the better or fall completely apart. I took one last deep breath of cool evening air, steadied my nerves as much as possible, and reached for the door handle. Whatever waited for me inside, whether it was opportunity or disaster, I was about to find out. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled the door open and stepped into a world that felt nothing like my own. The interior of Rosewood Cafe was intimidatingly elegant. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, rich leather seating arranged around polished mahogany tables, and every single patron looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. I felt my cheap jacket suddenly weigh heavy on my shoulders as I scanned the room nervously, searching. Then I saw her. The cleaning woman from yesterday, except she looked nothing like cleaning staff now. She wore a silk blouse and cream that probably cost more than my monthly rent, paired with tailored pants and accessories that screamed old money. Pearl earrings, a diamond bracelet catching the light, a designer handbag resting beside her chair. She'd transformed completely, revealing what she'd been hiding all along. Wealth, status, power. But it was the man sitting across from her who stole all my attention. He was devastatingly handsome in that cold, untouchable way. Sharp jawline, steel gray eyes that assessed everything with calculating precision, and a black suit tailored so perfectly it must have been custom-made. His broad shoulders filled the chair with commanding presence, and he was watching me approach with an expression I couldn't read, like I was a puzzle he needed to solve, or an investment he was considering. "You came," the woman said brightly, her entire demeanor different from yesterday's humble act. "Please, sit down." I lowered myself into the chair awkwardly, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. My focus kept returning to the man who still hadn't spoken, who just continued that unnerving stare. Then I caught his scent properly for the first time, and my biology responded before my brain could stop it. Cedar and smoke, rich and overwhelming, pure alpha dominance, that made my carefully suppressed omega instinct scream in recognition. My body wanted to react, to submit, and I had to fight every cell to remain composed. "This is my son, Miller," the woman announced with unmistakable pride. "Miller, this is—" She paused expectantly. "Jonah," I managed, my throat suddenly dry as desert sand. Miller gave the barest nod. No smile, no warmth, no social pleasantries, just cold evaluation, like he was examining quarterly reports instead of meeting another human being. The silence stretched uncomfortably while I tried to figure out what was happening, why I was here, what they wanted from me. "I should be honest with you, Jonah," the woman continued, lifting her teacup with practiced grace. "I'm not a cleaning lady. My name is Flossie Harrington, and Miller here is the CEO of Harrington Industries, one of the largest corporate entities in the city." My stomach dropped through the floor. Harrington, the Harringtons, the family whose name appeared on buildings and in financial news constantly, the billionaires who basically owned half the city's commercial real estate. "I apologize for the deception," Flossie continued smoothly, though her sharp eyes missed nothing about my shocked reaction. "But I've been searching for the right omega for my son, and when I encountered you yesterday at your office, everything about you, your natural scent, your demeanor, your authenticity, made me think you might be exactly what Miller needs." My brain struggled to process her words. This had to be some kind of joke. "Wait, you want me to? What exactly are you suggesting?" "Marriage to Miller," Flossie stated calmly. as if discussing the weather rather than my entire future. An arranged partnership. You would receive financial security, social status, protection, and a comfortable life. Miller would gain a suitable Omega partner to stabilize his public image and bring balance to his personal circumstances. I turned to look at Miller, desperately searching for some sign this was insane, that he'd object to his mother bartering him like property. But he remained silent, fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table edge, his expression completely unreadable. I was a business transaction to him, nothing more. What if I refuse? I asked, trying to inject some backbone into my voice, despite feeling like I might pass out. Flossie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But before she could respond, Miller finally spoke, and his voice was deep, cold, and absolutely commanding. You won't refuse. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. Not a question, not a request. A statement of absolute certainty that made every hair on my body stand up. This man was used to getting exactly what he wanted, when he wanted it, and he saw no possibility of defiance. I won't force you, Miller continued, leaning back casually as if we were discussing nothing important. But I am offering you a realistic arrangement. 6 months. A trial period. If at any point this isn't working, or you're genuinely unhappy, you're free to leave. The contract ends, no obligations, and if I walk out right now, I challenged, finding a small spark of defiance despite my fear. Miller's gray eyes locked onto mine with laser intensity. Then you'll lose your job tomorrow morning. Your apartment lease will mysteriously terminate, and your Omega status, the identity you've worked so hard to keep hidden, will become public knowledge. Your colleagues will know, your former friends will know, everyone will know what you really are. The blood drained from my face. The casual threat delivered in that emotionless tone was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. They'd investigated me thoroughly. They knew about my financial struggles, my secret suppressant prescriptions, my carefully constructed double life. Everything. I was completely trapped, boxed into a corner with no escape route visible. But the worst part, some small traitorous part of me was actually curious. What if this alpha was different from the others? What if this gilded cage came with actual care instead of just control? Or was I just being desperately naive, walking willingly into a prison that would slowly suffocate everything that made me who I was? I need time, I whispered finally, the words barely audible over the cafe's background music. To think about this. Flossie nodded gracefully. You have until tomorrow morning. We'll expect your decision then. I left the cafe in a daze, walking the streets for hours without really seeing them. My mind churning through impossible choices. Go back to my tiny apartment, my dead-end job, my lonely existence where I had to hide my true nature every single day, or step into this unknown world of wealth and danger, where I'd be bound to a man I didn't know, living under rules I didn't understand. When I finally returned home that night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there in the darkness, staring at shadows on the ceiling, weighing freedom against security, risk against safety. By the time dawn light crept through my window, I still hadn't found a clear answer. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever I decided would change the entire trajectory of my life. There was no going back to who I'd been yesterday. That version of Jonah was already gone, dissolved the moment that cleaning cart had stopped beside my desk. Now I just had to figure out who I was going to become. My phone shattered the morning silence at exactly 7 o'clock. I grabbed it with shaking hands, already knowing who it would be. Well? Flossie's voice came through, polite but expecting only one answer. I took the deepest breath of my life. 6 months. I agreed, because realistically, what choice did I have? They held all the cards, my job, my home, my secrets. But maybe, just maybe, this terrifying leap into the unknown would lead somewhere better than the small, fearful life I'd been living. Excellent decision, Flossie replied warmly. A car will arrive in 2 hours. Pack your essentials. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me staring around my cramped apartment with sudden nostalgia. This place had been my sanctuary for 3 years. Tiny, worn down, barely affordable, but mine. And now I was abandoning it for a stranger's mansion, trading independence for survival, gambling my entire future on the slim hope that this arrangement might somehow work out. I packed mechanically, shoving clothes into my single battered suitcase, leaving behind most of my possessions, because they wouldn't fit the life I was walking into anyway. When the sleek black car pulled up outside exactly 2 hours later, the driver took my pathetic luggage without comment, and we glided through the city toward areas I'd only seen in magazines. The Harrington estate wasn't just large, it was obscene. High iron gates opened onto grounds that seemed to stretch forever, perfectly manicured gardens, surrounding a central fountain, and the mansion itself gleaming like something from a historical drama. This wasn't a house, it was a statement of power, a monument to wealth I couldn't even conceptualize. Flossie waited at the entrance, her smile welcoming in a way that felt both genuine and calculated. "Welcome home, Jonah." Home. The word felt foreign. Impossible. This palace would never be home. But I followed her inside anyway, my eyes widening despite my determination to stay composed. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork lined the walls, and every surface gleamed with expensive perfection. The entrance hall alone was bigger than my entire apartment had been. "Your room is upstairs," Flossie guided, leading me up a grand staircase that curved dramatically. When she opened the bedroom door, I actually gasped. The space was enormous. A king-sized bed that looked like a cloud, a walk-in closet larger than my old living room, a bathroom that resembled a luxury spa, and French doors opening onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. "This is all for me?" I asked in disbelief, unable to process such extravagance. "Of course. And for your privacy, Miller's room is at the opposite end of the hall. You'll have your own space, your own sanctuary. We understand you need time to adjust to these new circumstances." The consideration surprised me. At least they weren't expecting immediate intimacy or forced proximity. That was something. "Take your time settling in," Flossie continued. "We'll have lunch at 1 o'clock to discuss household expectations and boundaries. Make yourself comfortable." After she left, I collapsed onto the impossibly soft bed, my mind reeling. 24 hours ago I'd been worried about making rent. Now I was living in a billionaire's mansion, engaged in a contract marriage to a man who looked at me like a spreadsheet. The surreal nature of my situation hit me in waves. Disbelief, fear, a strange kind of excitement I didn't want to acknowledge. A knock on the door jolted me upright. "Come in," I called, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Miller entered, dressed casually in a simple white shirt and dark pants, but somehow still radiating that intimidating authority. Everything about him screamed control and power, even in relaxed clothing. "Are you settling in all right?" he asked formally, keeping a respectful distance. "Yes, thank you for this room. It's incredible." He moved closer and suddenly I could smell him properly again, that overwhelming cedar and smoke that made my biology respond in ways my brain wanted to ignore. My omega instincts recognized him as a powerful alpha, my body wanting to react even though my mind screamed warnings. "I want to be clear about something," Miller said, his tone professional and detached. "I have no immediate expectations regarding physical intimacy or traditional marital obligations. This arrangement is primarily practical. We both need time to adjust, to learn about each other, to see if compatibility is even possible between us. I will respect your boundaries and privacy completely." "Then why go through with this at all?" I asked boldly, needing to understand his motivation. "The contract? The arrangement? Bringing a stranger into your home if you don't actually want a real relationship, why bother?" Miller hesitated, and for the first time I saw a crack in his composed facade. "Because your scent helps my insomnia," he admitted quietly, almost reluctantly. I blinked, confused. "My scent?" He looked uncomfortable explaining personal medical issues, but continued anyway. "Alpha insomnia is a rare condition where dominant alphas experience chronic sleep disruption that doesn't respond to normal treatments. Medication fails. Therapy is useless. The only thing that works is proximity to a compatible omega, the right biochemical match. When my mother encountered you at your office, when she came home carrying your scent on her clothes, I slept properly for the first time in months. Actually slept deeply and restfully instead of the fractured half-consciousness I normally experience." Understanding dawned, followed immediately by hurt. "So I'm basically your prescription sleep aid? A human remedy for your medical problem?" Miller stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance he'd maintained, his gray eyes intense and searching. No, he said quietly, and something in his voice sounded almost vulnerable. You're significantly more important than that. You might be exactly what I've been searching for, even if I didn't know I was looking. Then he turned and left, leaving me breathless and utterly confused, my heart pounding from his proximity and his cryptic words. Was he being genuine? Or was this just sophisticated manipulation? A prettier cage wrapped in considerate words. I stood alone in my luxurious new prison, understanding with absolute clarity that these 6 months would be the most complicated, dangerous, emotionally charged period of my entire life. Miller wasn't a simple man. This arrangement wasn't straightforward, and somewhere beneath my fear and uncertainty, a tiny spark of hope flickered, dangerous, unwanted, but undeniably there. Maybe this could be more than just a contract. Maybe I wasn't just a biological solution to his problem. Maybe against all logic and reason, something real could grow in this artificial situation. Or maybe I was just a fool, desperately clinging to fantasy because the alternative, accepting that I'd sold myself for security, was too painful to acknowledge. Only time would reveal the truth, and I'd just committed to 6 months of discovering which possibility was real. The next morning at breakfast, Flossie laid out the household rules with the precision of a corporate board meeting. She sat across from me at the enormous dining table, her posture perfect, her tone polite yet absolutely firm. I listened carefully, understanding that these weren't suggestions, they were non-negotiable conditions of my new existence. First and foremost, she began, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care, when we attend public functions, you are Miller's partner in every sense. The media will scrutinize us constantly. Society expects impeccable behavior, respectful, dignified, scandal-free. Your conduct reflects directly on the Harrington name and legacy. I nodded, absorbing the weight of that responsibility. One wrong move, one careless word, and I could damage a reputation built over generations. Second, Flossie continued, her eyes sharp and assessing, your Omega status remains absolutely confidential. Only immediate family and our most trusted household staff know the truth. To the outside world, you're simply Miller's fiancé. Nothing more specific than that. This protects both you and our family from unnecessary complications and potential exploitation. Privacy made sense. In this world of wealth and power, any vulnerability could be weaponized. My Omega nature would make me a target for those seeking leverage against the Harringtons. Third, and this is critically important, Flossie's voice dropped lower, more serious. During Miller's heat cycles, you must maintain complete physical distance. An alpha in that state loses significant control over instinct and aggression. If you cannot manage your own biological responses, the consequences could be severe and permanent. Bonding might occur without proper consent or preparation. Do you understand what I'm telling you? My throat went completely dry. Heat cycles. Permanent bonding. Suddenly this arrangement felt terrifyingly real, no longer abstract or theoretical. I understand. I managed to whisper, excellent. Flossie's expression softened slightly, satisfied with my comprehension. Now Miller has already left for the office. You should rest today, settle in properly. A stylist will arrive this afternoon. To move your wardrobe, we have several social events scheduled for the coming weeks, and you'll need appropriate clothing. The speed of these changes left me dizzy. Yesterday I owned maybe 3 decent outfits. Today I was getting an entire custom wardrobe. My life was transforming so rapidly I could barely process each new development before the next one arrived. The following week passed in a strange, lonely blur. Miller was rarely home, consumed by work commitments and business obligations. We only crossed paths during evening meals, and even those interactions remained frustratingly superficial. Polite conversation about his day, neutral observations about weather or news. Surface-level pleasantries that revealed nothing genuine about either of us. No emotional connection formed, no real intimacy developed. We were strangers sharing a roof, nothing more. But then came the night that changed everything between us. I woke around 2 in the morning, needing the bathroom, stumbling into the hallway still half asleep. That's when I noticed light spilling from Miller's study, unusual at such a late hour. Curiosity drew me closer, and through the partially open door I saw him slumped over his desk, surrounded by scattered papers and multiple cold coffee mugs, his exhaustion evident even from a distance. "Miller?" I called softly, stepping inside. He jerked upright, startled, eyes bloodshot and unfocused. "Jonah? Why are you awake at this hour?" "I saw your light on," I explained, moving closer despite my uncertainty about intruding. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just work," he lied unconvincingly, his voice rough from fatigue. "Important presentation next week that requires preparation." But I recognized what I was actually seeing. The insomnia had returned despite my presence in the house. He was deliberately isolating himself, keeping distance, suffering alone rather than asking for help. "You need rest," I said firmly, surprising myself with the authority in my tone. "Work can wait until morning. You're destroying yourself." "Jonah, you don't understand the pressure." "Please," I interrupted gently but insistently. "Just sleep properly for one night. Let yourself actually rest." Miller stared at me with obvious surprise, perhaps not expecting genuine concern from someone who was essentially his contractual obligation. "Would you?" He hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his normally composed features. "Would you consider staying in my room tonight?" My heart lurched unexpectedly. "What? Only for sleep?" he clarified quickly, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "If you're comfortable with that, your presence helps me rest properly. Your scent calms something in my biology. But if that makes you uncomfortable, I completely understand and won't push." "I'll stay," I heard myself say before fully considering the implications. Because despite everything strange about our situation, I recognized his loneliness, his brokenness, and somehow wanted to provide whatever small comfort I could offer. His room was massive and masculine. Dark colors, minimal decoration, expensive but impersonal furniture. I lay down awkwardly on one side of his enormous bed while he settled on the opposite edge, maintaining respectful distance between us. The silence felt heavy and uncomfortable initially, both of us hyper-aware of the other's presence. But gradually I heard his breathing slow and deepen. He was actually sleeping, peacefully and naturally, something he clearly hadn't managed in far too long. And lying there in the darkness, listening to his quiet rest, I realized something important. Maybe I wasn't just a tool or solution to him. Maybe I actually mattered as someone who could bring him genuine comfort and peace. Everything shifted after that night. Miller became gradually more open, less guarded around me. We started sharing breakfast together each morning instead of eating separately. He told me about his workday when he came home, asked about mine. I began sharing stories from my past, my struggles, my fears. Slowly, carefully, the walls between us started crumbling brick by brick. Then Flossie made an announcement that filled me with anxious dread. A major charity gala was scheduled for next month, and Miller and I would attend together, publicly. As an official couple, hundreds of elite guests, extensive media coverage, society's most influential families all gathered in one place. My first real test was approaching. Could I convincingly play the role of Miller's devoted partner? Would I embarrass him with my ignorance of their social customs and unspoken rules? Or would everyone immediately see through our carefully constructed facade and recognize the truth, that I was just a struggling nobody who'd been plucked from obscurity and dressed up like a doll for their amusement? The preparation for that single evening consumed weeks. A designer came to create a custom tuxedo specifically for me. A stylist practiced styling my hair multiple ways until finding the perfect look. Flossie drilled me relentlessly on proper etiquette, which fork to use, how to make appropriate small talk, when to smile and when to remain serious. Maintain confident posture, she instructed repeatedly. Stay close to Miller. Make eye contact when people speak to you. And absolutely do not make controversial statements to any journalists. Polite neutrality is your safest approach to everything. I was terrified, completely, utterly terrified. But I also understood this was unavoidable. If I wanted to remain in Miller's world, I had to prove I belonged there, that I could handle the pressure and scrutiny without crumbling. This gala would either validate Flossie's choice in bringing me here, or expose me as hopelessly inadequate for the role she'd assigned me. As the date approached, my anxiety intensified. But something else was building too. A strange determination. I wouldn't embarrass Miller. I wouldn't disappoint Flossie's faith in me. I would survive this test, no matter how uncomfortable or frightening it became. Because somewhere along the way, without fully realizing when it happened, this arrangement had stopped feeling purely transactional. I actually cared about Miller now. I wanted to support him, protect his reputation, make him proud. And that shift in my feelings scared me almost as much as the approaching gala itself. The night of the gala arrived with terrifying finality. I stood before my bedroom mirror in the custom-tailored black tuxedo, barely recognizing my own reflection. The expensive fabric fit perfectly, transforming my appearance from ordinary to almost elegant. Was this really me, the struggling office worker who'd worried about rent just weeks ago? Miller appeared in my doorway, already dressed in his own impeccable suit, and when our eyes met, something indefinable passed between us. He looked stunning in a way that made my breath catch, but more surprising was the expression on his face when he looked at me. Something warm and appreciative that I'd never seen before. "You look really good," he said awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable delivering compliments. "Thank you," I managed nervously. "So do you?" He crossed the room and gently took my wrist, his touch sending unexpected electricity through my system. "If you feel overwhelmed at any point tonight, just signal me. We'll leave immediately. Your comfort matters more than any social obligation." That protectiveness surprised me deeply. Maybe he genuinely cared about my well-being beyond just maintaining appearances. The venue was breathtakingly grand, a historic ballroom with soaring ceilings, massive crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, and hundreds of impeccably dressed guests, representing the city's most powerful families. When we entered together, I felt every eye turn toward us, heard the immediate whispers begin circulating through the crowd. "Who is that with Miller Harrington? When did he get engaged? Where did this person come from?" My face burned with self-consciousness, but Miller's hand found mine, squeezing gently in reassurance. That simple touch grounded me, reminded me I wasn't alone in this overwhelming situation. "Just smile," he murmured quietly, his breath warm against my ear. I forced my face into what I hoped resembled confident happiness and stayed close to his side as we navigated through the crowd. People approached continuously. Business associates, socialites, Miller's colleagues, all offering polite greetings while their eyes assessed me with barely concealed curiosity and judgment. I could feel their skepticism, their unspoken questions about whether I truly belonged in their exclusive world. Then he appeared. Another alpha tall, blonde designer suit, and a smile that radiated false charm and barely hidden contempt. He approached with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything in his college life. "Miller," he greeted with exaggerated familiarity. "It's been too long. And who is your new acquisition?" His tone was deliberately insulting, reducing me to an object, a possession Miller had purchased. My face flushed hot with humiliation, shame flooding through me at being treated so dismissively in front of all these people. But Miller's response was ice cold and absolutely lethal. "This is my partner Derek. And if you use that disrespectful tone again, I will personally ensure your company's stock crashes before the market opens Monday morning. One phone call is all it would take." The threat wasn't loud or dramatic, just stated as simple fact, which somehow made it more terrifying. Derek's smug smile evaporated instantly. He laughed awkwardly, mumbled something incoherent, and retreated quickly into the crowd, clearly understanding he'd crossed a dangerous line. I stood there stunned. Miller had defended me, publicly, decisively, without hesitation. He'd prioritized my dignity over social politeness, made it absolutely clear that disrespecting me meant facing serious consequences. "Thank you," I whispered, deeply touched by his protection. Miller looked at me with an expression softer than I'd ever seen from him before. "Nobody disrespects you while you're with me. That's a promise I intend to keep." Something fundamental shifted in that moment. He wasn't just the cold CEO who'd acquired me through a contract. He was protective, possessive in a way that felt caring rather than controlling. And I realized with startling clarity that I actually liked this feeling. Liked being defended, liked mattering to him. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly. We danced together, awkward initially, because I barely knew how to waltz. But Miller guided me patiently through each step. "Just relax," he kept whispering whenever I tensed nervously. "Follow my lead. Trust me." And gradually, I did relax. I let myself enjoy being held in his arms, surrounded by his scent, moving together to the orchestra's music. For those few minutes, the watching crowd faded away, and it felt like only the two of us existed in our own private world. When we finally returned home, I was exhausted but also surprisingly happy. The gala had been our first successful public appearance, proof that we could function convincingly as a couple when circumstances demanded it. Flossie congratulated us warmly. You both looked perfect together. Society is already talking about how well matched you seem, praising your chemistry. Miller and I exchanged glances. Chemistry? Was that real or just effective acting? But later that night, alone in my room, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. Miller's touch, his protectiveness, the gentleness he'd shown while teaching me to dance. Was I developing genuine feelings for him? Real emotional attachment beyond the practical arrangement we'd agreed to. The possibility terrified me, because if I fell for him and he didn't reciprocate those feelings, I'd be completely devastated. The contract would eventually end, and I'd return to my old life alone, nursing a broken heart with no one to blame but myself for getting emotionally involved when I should have stayed detached. That fear drove me from my room seeking fresh air. I found my way to the mansion's rooftop terrace, needing space to think clearly. But Miller was already there, standing alone, gazing up at the stars with an expression of such loneliness that it physically hurt to witness. Couldn't sleep either? I asked quietly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, surprised, then relaxed slightly. No. You? Same problem. We stood together in comfortable silence for several moments, neither feeling pressured to fill the quiet with unnecessary words. Then Miller spoke, his voice thoughtful and sincere. Tonight, thank you for handling everything so well. You were remarkable, especially considering how overwhelming that environment must have been. I didn't want to disappoint you, I admitted honestly. Miller turned to face me fully, his gray eyes intense and searching in the moonlight. You could never disappoint me, Jonah. That's impossible. Those simple words struck directly into my heart, carrying a weight and significance I wasn't sure he fully intended. But they mattered. They mattered so much that I felt tears threatening behind my eyes, emotion overwhelming my careful composure. Standing there on that terrace with Miller, the city lights spread below us and stars above, I understood with absolute certainty that I was falling for him, really truly falling, and that realization was both exhilarating and absolutely terrifying in equal measure. The following 2 months transformed our relationship in ways I never anticipated. Miller and I began having real conversations, not superficial pleasantries but genuine discussions about our lives, our fears, our hopes. He opened up about his childhood, describing how Flossie had raised him alone after his father's death, maintaining impossible standards and strict discipline that left little room for emotional warmth or childhood joy. I always wondered, he confessed, one evening on our usual terrace meeting spot, why I felt so empty despite having everything material wealth could provide. The answer was painfully simple. I had nobody who saw me as Miller, not as a CEO or a Harrington heir, just a person deserving of uncomplicated affection. His vulnerability touched something deep inside me. I shared my own struggles in return, hiding my Omega identity from judgmental society, my family's cruel rejection when they discovered the truth, the years of lonely survival where I trusted nobody because trust had always led to betrayal and pain. You're incredibly strong, Miller said with genuine admiration. You endured so much hardship yet remained kind, remained decent. You didn't let bitterness poison who you are fundamentally. You had to be strong too, I countered gently. In different ways, loneliness damages people regardless of their bank account balance. But I'm not lonely anymore, Miller said softly, his eyes meeting mine with startling intensity. Not since you arrived. That moment marked another shift between us. We grew closer, not just physically sharing the same space, but emotionally connecting in meaningful ways. Our dinners stretched longer with conversation. Our laughter came more naturally and frequently. Even Flossie noticed the change, watching us with quiet satisfaction and secret smiles. Then one afternoon, she summoned me to the private study, her expression unusually serious. My stomach knotted with immediate anxiety. Jonah, she began carefully, choosing her words with obvious deliberation. There's something about Miller's past that you should understand. He had another Omega before you, an arranged introduction similar to yours. Her name was Iris. My heart sank hearing about previous romantic history I knew nothing about. Iris was intelligent, beautiful, and Miller began genuinely caring for her. He started trusting her, opening his guarded heart. But when his heat cycle approached, When permanent bonding became imminent, Flossie paused, pain flickering across her normally composed features. She ran, disappeared completely. Iris never loved him. She only wanted access to family money and social status. Her betrayal destroyed Miller emotionally. Afterward, he sealed himself off completely, terrified of attachment, convinced that vulnerability only led to devastating abandonment. Understanding crashed over me. That explained Miller's initial coldness, his emotional distance, his reluctance to trust or connect. He was protecting himself from repeating that terrible experience. I'm telling you this, Flossie continued seriously, so you'll comprehend what's at stake. If you're not genuinely committed to Miller, please tell me now. Don't hurt him again. He might not survive another betrayal like that. I sat in heavy silence, examining my own feelings with brutal honesty. Was I truly committed? Did I genuinely want to stay with Miller permanently? Or was I just enjoying the comfort and security he provided? That night I analyzed everything. My growing feelings, my attachment to him, the way my heart responded to his smile, his protectiveness, his rare moments of vulnerability that he showed only to me. And I realized the truth with startling clarity. I had fallen completely for Miller Harrington. The next week, Miller invited me to join him at his office as his personal assistant. I want you working alongside me, he proposed carefully. Maintaining your independence, having your own professional identity and purpose. I don't want you feeling trapped or financially helpless. You deserve respect and autonomy. Why offer this? I asked, surprised by the gesture. Because, Miller hesitated, showing vulnerability. I want you staying here willingly, finding genuine happiness, not enduring imprisonment out of obligation. You deserve freedom, deserve choices. I never want you feeling trapped with me. That moment confirmed everything. This man was fundamentally different from what I'd initially feared. He genuinely cared about my well-being beyond just fulfilling our contract terms. Thank you, Miller, I said sincerely. I truly appreciate this. He smiled, small, genuine, and absolutely precious to me. Working at his office proved initially awkward but gradually comfortable. I found purpose, felt productive, enjoyed having meaningful responsibilities. But then one afternoon, I accidentally discovered medical documents in his desk drawer while searching for paperwork, heat suppressant prescriptions with expiration dates showing next week. His heat cycle was approaching. Soon, my heart raced remembering Flossie's stern warning about maintaining distance. But circumstances had changed dramatically. We were emotionally close now, genuinely connected. What would happen? Would Miller send me away for safety? Or would he hang me staying near him? And if he wanted me present during his heat, was I ready for permanent bonding? That life-altering, irreversible connection? If I bonded with Miller and he didn't truly love me, I'd spend my entire existence trapped in a one-sided relationship, with no escape possible. That night I couldn't rest, anxiety consuming me completely. Finally, I went to Miller's study where he was working late. He looked up when I knocked, immediately noticing my distressed state. What's wrong? He asked with obvious concern. Your heat cycle is coming, I stated directly, unable to approach the subject gently. Next week, Miller froze completely. How did you know? I saw the documents accidentally. Medical prescriptions. He sighed, looking helpless and resigned. Yes. It starts next week. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken implications and fears. What do you want me to do? I whispered finally. Miller's eyes met mine with painful intensity. I want you safe, distant. Flossie will arrange a hotel where you'll be comfortable and protected. Because I absolutely cannot risk hurting you. Alphas lose control during heat, become dangerous, unpredictable. I would never forgive myself if I harmed you or forced something you weren't ready to accept. His concern was genuine, his care obvious, but I needed to know the complete truth about us. What if I wanted to stay? I asked slowly, gathering courage. Here with you during it. Miller's breath stopped completely. Jonah, do you understand what you're suggesting? If you're present during my heat, bonding could occur. Permanent, irreversible, lifetime connection. You'd be tied to me forever. And I honestly don't know if I can give you the happiness and love you deserve. I'm damaged, broken. Maybe I trust you anyway, I interrupted softly, tears filling my eyes. Maybe I genuinely want staying with you regardless of risks. Miller stood, crossed to me and gently cupped my face in his hands. "Jonah," he whispered, raw emotion breaking through his usual composure. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Completely sure you want permanent commitment? Or are these just temporary feelings that will fade?" This was the question I'd asked myself repeatedly. And now I finally knew the answer with absolute certainty. "I love you, Miller," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know exactly when or how it happened. But I love you and I want staying with you. Permanently." Silence. Then Miller pulled me into a desperate embrace, holding me like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I love you too," he whispered against my ear. "You brought me back to life. You showed me that trust is still possible, that not everyone will betray me. You're everything I never knew I needed." We stood there holding each other, finally completely honest, finally emotionally vulnerable without fear. And I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. This was real. This was home. This was where I belonged forever.